In a world where nature paints the night sky with living light, one man's quest for beauty will unravel secrets worth killing for. Will Thomas and Lyrena protect their glowing paradise from corporate greed? Subscribe now to uncover the luminous mystery of Aurelia. Thomas adjusted his easel beneath the ancient Aurelian tree, its crystalline branches shimmering like frozen lightning against the indigo sky. For weeks he had wandered these woods, chasing the elusive dance of pollen that transformed ordinary nights into celestial wonders. Tonight felt different, though. The air carried an electric charge, and the usual amber glow seemed more vibrant than ever before. The wind whispered through the leaves in patterns that almost seemed deliberate, creating waves of illumination that pulsed across the forest floor. As he mixed his pigments, trying desperately to capture the impossible hues, a particularly brilliant cascade of pollen drifted down from above. It caught the gentle breeze, spiraling in patterns too complex for any human hand to replicate. Frustration welled up inside him. No matter how skilled he became, his brushes could never truly do justice to this living masterpiece. Each stroke seemed to flatten the depth. Each color choice failed to capture the dynamic shifts in hue that occurred naturally in the floating particles. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustle behind him. Turning quickly, he caught sight of movement among the trees, a figure moving gracefully through the illuminated darkness. At first glance, she appeared almost part of the phenomenon itself. Her skin bore a subtle luminescence that pulsed gently in time with the drifting pollen clouds. Her presence seemed to affect the very air around her, causing the pollen patterns to shift and swirl in ways that defied natural explanation. "Are you lost?" she asked, stepping closer. Her voice carried the same ethereal quality as the environment around them, each word seeming to resonate with the ambient glow. Few outsiders venture this deep into the Aurelian groves after dark. Thomas noticed how the pollen seemed drawn to her presence, swirling in intricate patterns that seemed almost deliberate, forming temporary constellations that mirrored her movements through the space. "I'm Thomas," he managed, still capturing her image in quick sketches. His pencil moved furiously across the paper, trying to document how the light interacted with her form. "An artist, though I suspect my work tonight will be particularly inadequate." He gestured to his canvas, where the colors already seemed pale imitations compared to reality. The woman smiled, revealing teeth that glinted faintly in the pollen-lit darkness, her expression suggesting she understood his struggle all too well. "I'm Lyrena," she said, extending a hand that seemed to trail light in its wake. "And perhaps inadequacy comes from misunderstanding what you're trying to capture." She moved closer to his easel, studying the painting with eyes that reflected the dancing colors around them. Her gaze lingered on specific areas of the canvas, as if reading something deeper in the brushstrokes. "These aren't just random patterns, you know. Each swirl, each pulse of light carries meaning, stories older than our civilization." Lyrena knelt beside a patch of lumina grass, its blades releasing a steady stream of silver pollen that floated upward like tiny stars. "Watch carefully," she instructed, cupping her hands gently around a cluster of the particles. To Thomas's astonishment, they began to arrange themselves into distinct shapes, first simple geometric forms, then more complex symbols that seemed to pulse with meaning. The transformation happened gradually, each shape evolving into the next with fluid grace, as if following an invisible script written in the air itself. "This isn't just about pretty colors," she explained, her voice taking on a reverent tone that matched the sacredness of the moment. "Each species of plant tells its own story through its pollen. Some speak of ancient migrations, others of geological shifts or climatic changes." She released the particles, which dispersed into the air, leaving behind a faint echo of their pattern in Thomas's mind, an impression that lingered like the memory of a beautiful melody heard long ago. Over the following days, Lyrena became his guide to this hidden language of light. They would spend hours in the groves, collecting samples in specially treated glass vials that preserved not just the physical substance, but something more intangible, the essence of each story told by the pollen. Thomas discovered that when viewed under certain conditions, The collected samples would project their narratives onto surfaces, creating living murals that shifted and evolved over time. These weren't static images, but dynamic displays that responded to environmental factors and even the emotional state of those observing them. "It's like capturing memories," Thomas whispered one evening as they watched a particularly vivid display unfold across the face of an ancient stone. The images showed what appeared to be early settlers arriving in small boats, their awestruck faces illuminated by the same glowing pollen that now danced around them. The scenes played out in perfect detail, the tension in their bodies as they approached unknown shores, the wonder in their eyes as they first encountered the luminescent forests. "But whose memories are they?" "That's the mystery," Lyrina replied, her expression thoughtful as she traced a pattern in the air with her finger, causing nearby pollen to follow her movement. "Some believe it's the plants recording history. Others think it's something more fundamental, perhaps the land itself remembering." She touched a nearby tree, causing a cascade of golden pollen to swirl around them, forming shapes that seemed to echo her words. "What we do know is that those who can read these stories properly become keepers of knowledge spanning centuries." Their partnership deepened as they explored more remote areas of the Aurelian forests, venturing into regions where the pollen patterns grew increasingly complex and sophisticated. Thomas found himself adapting his artistic techniques to better capture the ephemeral nature of the pollen displays. He developed special pigments that reacted to the ambient light, creating paintings that shifted subtly throughout the day, mimicking the behavior of their natural counterparts. These new materials allowed him to capture not just the visual aspect of the phenomenon, but some of its inherent dynamism as well. Lyrina proved an invaluable collaborator, teaching him how to interpret the increasingly complex patterns they encountered. They discovered that certain combinations of pollens created entirely new narratives when mixed, like musical chords forming unexpected harmonies. Some evenings, they would lose track of time completely, immersed in the unfolding stories of civilizations long past. Ancient dances played out in floating particles, forgotten rituals reenacted in glowing tableaus, historical events retold through patterns that resonated with emotional truth rather than mere factual accuracy. "You're changing," Lyrina observed one night as they rested beneath a canopy of interwoven branches, the pollen cascading around them like a gentle rain of light. "Your skin, it's starting to carry the glow." Indeed, Thomas had noticed subtle changes in himself. His once plain complexion now bore faint traces of luminescence, especially after extended exposure to concentrated pollen fields. More significantly, he found himself instinctively understanding patterns that had previously baffled him, recognizing narrative structures in the swirling particles that others might miss entirely. "The elders say this happens sometimes," Lyrina continued, her voice barely above a whisper as she watched the changes manifest across his skin. "When someone becomes deeply attuned to the pollen's language, they begin to integrate with it." She reached out, tracing a particularly bright vein of light coursing through his forearm, watching as the pattern responded to her touch. "It's both a gift and a responsibility. You're becoming part of something much larger than yourself." The tranquility of their research was shattered one afternoon by the distant hum of machinery, a sound that cut through the natural symphony of the forest like a discordant note. Emerging from the dense foliage, they spotted a convoy of sleek black vehicles winding through the forest, their solar panels gleaming ominously in the dappled light. Men in protective suits were systematically harvesting entire clusters of Aurelian trees, their movements efficient and disturbingly precise, showing no regard for the delicate ecosystem they were disrupting. "Vogan Corporation," Lyrina spat, recognition flashing in her eyes as she pulled Thomas deeper into cover. "They've been encroaching on our lands for months now, but this is worse than we feared." She pointed to massive extraction units that were processing living trees while they still stood, their roots screaming silently as life was drained away. "Alex Vogan thinks he can commodify everything, even magic." The scale of the operation became apparent as they crept closer, careful to remain hidden among the shadows. Massive processing units were extracting pollen at an industrial rate, their sterile efficiency stripping away the very soul of the forest. Where once there had been natural symphonies of light, Now only harsh, artificial illumination remained, casting cold shadows over denuded landscapes. The contrast was devastating. Areas recently harvested looked like wounds in the earth, raw and bleeding darkness, where once there had been vibrant life. "We have to stop them," Thomas whispered, his artist's heart breaking at the desecration. But Lyrina shook her head grimly, her expression carrying the weight of generations who had fought similar battles. "It's not just about stopping them here. Vogan wants to bottle the stories, sell them to the highest bidder. Imagine ancient wisdom reduced to marketing slogans, historical records turned into entertainment packages." She touched a surviving tree, causing its remaining pollen to flare briefly in protest. They don't understand what they're destroying. Their confrontation with Alex Vogan came sooner than expected. He arrived personally to oversee operations, his sharp features illuminated by dozens of portable floodlights that clashed violently with the natural glow of remaining pollen. "Mr. Riddle, I presume?" he called out, spotting Thomas near the edge of the clearing. His voice carried an unsettling mix of charm and menace, like a predator trying to pass as harmless. "I've seen your work. Quite impressive, really. Such dedication to capturing the ephemeral." Vogan's smile held all the warmth of a predator's grin as he circled them, his expensive shoes crunching through fallen pollen that should have been floating free. "You see, we've identified a unique property in this pollen, its ability to influence human cognition. Can you imagine the applications? Enhanced learning systems, perfect recall technologies, even." He paused dramatically, savoring the moment. Direct memory transfer. His eyes gleamed with possibilities as he gestured to his team setting up monitoring equipment. "We're talking about revolutionizing education, entertainment, communication." But at what cost? Lyrina stepped forward, her luminous presence drawing all eyes despite the harsh, artificial lighting. "You're destroying the very system that creates these patterns. Once gone, they can't be replicated." Vogan regarded her with clinical interest, making notes on his tablet as if she were a specimen to be studied rather than a person to be respected. "Ah, one of the natives. Fascinating adaptation you've developed there. We'll need to study that more closely." The standoff intensified as Vogan's security team surrounded them, their weapons trained but fingers twitching with uncertainty in the face of something they couldn't fully comprehend. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Thomas argued, stepping between Lyrina and the approaching guards. His voice carried more authority than he'd ever used before, bolstered by the knowledge and power he'd gained from the pollen. "This isn't just biological material, it's a living archive of history and culture, a testament to countless generations of interaction between people and planet." Vogan laughed, a sound devoid of genuine amusement, echoing harshly against the dying forest backdrop. "Exactly why it's so valuable. Think of the market potential, authentic historical experiences, perfectly preserved emotional states." His eyes narrowed as he watched the pollen swirling protectively around Lyrina, sensing something beyond his scientific understanding. "And your little friend here seems to be developing quite the interesting connection to our product." Lyrina's skin began to glow more intensely, the pollen around them responding to her distress in visible waves of light. "You can't contain this power," she warned, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance that made several guards take involuntary steps back. "It belongs to the land, to the people who've lived with it for generations." Vogan's expression hardened, his businessman's instincts overriding his initial unease. "Sentimental nonsense. Progress requires sacrifice. Besides," he added with a calculating look, "your integration could prove most enlightening." Under cover of darkness, they gathered in a hidden cavern where ancient pollen patterns still danced undisturbed across the walls, their glow uncorrupted by artificial interference. Elders from Lyrina's community shared their knowledge, how similar threats had arisen before, always driven by outsiders seeking to exploit their sacred resource. "The pollen responds to intention," one elder explained, her skin radiating a soft blue light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the earth itself. "That's why Vogan's machines produce only dead matter. They lack understanding, respect." Thomas worked feverishly, combining his artistic skills with the traditional knowledge being shared. Together, they developed a plan to create a massive living mural that would demonstrate the true nature of the pollen's power, not as a commodity, but as a living, breathing chronicle of their world. "We'll use the oldest patterns," Lyrina suggested, touching a section of wall where particularly vibrant sequences played out continuously. "The ones that tell of unity between people and land, of balance maintained through generations of care and respect." Meanwhile, Vogan's operations expanded aggressively, pushing deeper into protected areas despite growing protests. Surveillance drones crisscrossed the skies, forcing them to work in ever more secluded locations. Supplies dwindled, and several attempts to sabotage the corporation's equipment ended in narrow escapes, with security forces getting alarmingly close to discovering their hiding places. Yet despite the mounting pressure, their resistance network grew, drawing support from communities across Aurelia who recognized the threat to their cultural heritage. The night of their grand demonstration arrived, chosen to coincide with the annual pollination festival when the forest's glow reached its peak intensity. As thousands gathered in the sacred clearing, Thomas and Lyrina worked together, using specially prepared canvases to channel the living pollen into an unprecedented display. Ancient patterns merged with contemporary stories, creating a narrative tapestry that spanned centuries. The air hummed with energy as the pollen responded to their guiding hands, forming shapes and sequences that told of both past struggles and future possibilities. Vogan arrived unexpectedly, accompanied by armed guards and media representatives eager to capture what they believed would be another opportunity to promote corporate interests. "A clever show," he admitted grudgingly as the display unfolded, its complexity far exceeding anything his scientists had managed to replicate, but ultimately unsustainable without proper management. His eyes narrowed as he watched the crowd's reaction, awe mixed with growing defiance, realization dawning in faces that had previously shown doubt or indifference. "You see?" Lyrina called out to the assembled crowd, her voice carrying clearly despite the lack of amplification. "It rejects those who come with ill intent." The pollen patterns shifted dramatically at her words, forming protective barriers around the gathering while simultaneously projecting images of Vogan's destructive activities across the night sky. These weren't mere accusations, but documented truths, captured by the very pollen his company sought to exploit, telling their own damning story of environmental devastation and cultural disrespect. The confrontation escalated rapidly as Vogan's team attempted to record the display for commercial purposes, their equipment sparking and failing as pollen patterns formed defensive barriers around the trees. "You see?" Lyrina called out to the assembled crowd, her voice carrying an authority that silenced all other noise. "It rejects those who come with ill intent." The message spread quickly through social networks, sparking protests at Vogan Corporation offices worldwide. Thomas pushed his abilities to their limits, channeling the collective energy of the gathering into a single, overwhelming display. Images of environmental destruction alternated with visions of sustainable harmony, while personal stories from affected communities wove through the narrative. The effect was transformative. Even some of Vogan's own employees began questioning their involvement, recording secret footage that would later prove crucial in exposing the corporation's illegal activities. During a pivotal press conference, Thomas unveiled his most ambitious work yet, a massive installation that combined living pollen with interactive technology. Viewers could literally step into historical events, experiencing them through the authentic emotions and perspectives of those who had lived them. The experience was so powerful that many left in tears, newly committed to protecting the source of such profound connection. Major news outlets picked up the story, and public opinion began shifting decisively against Vogan's predatory practices. Legal battles erupted as evidence of Vogan's environmental violations surfaced through whistleblowers and leaked documents. Thomas's artwork, now documenting both the beauty and the threat facing Aurelia, gained international attention. Museums competed to host exhibitions, but he insisted on displaying them only in spaces that promoted conservation and cultural preservation. "Art should inspire action," he declared during interviews, "not exist as mere decoration." This isn't about aesthetics, it's about survival, about preserving a way of life that's intrinsically connected to this land. Lyrina emerged as a powerful spokesperson for her people, her luminous presence commanding attention wherever she appeared. Together, they developed educational programs that taught both traditional knowledge and modern conservation techniques. The combination proved remarkably effective in mobilizing support for their cause, bridging gaps between scientific understanding and cultural wisdom that had long seemed insurmountable. Their presentations drew standing room-only crowds, with experts from multiple disciplines contributing to a growing body of research supporting their claims. Vogan fought back with characteristic ruthlessness, launching smear campaigns and attempting to discredit their work through planted stories in sympathetic media outlets. But the living nature of the pollen proved impossible to fake or control. When his company tried to create synthetic versions, they produced only lifeless imitations that crumbled within hours, unable to maintain the complex patterns that define the real phenomenon. The media coverage increasingly portrayed his efforts as not just environmentally destructive, but fundamentally misguided, highlighting the stark contrast between manufactured products and living heritage. During a crucial demonstration, Thomas revealed a breakthrough discovery. Certain pollen combinations could actually repair environmental damage when applied correctly. This revelation changed the narrative from mere preservation to active restoration, offering hope for areas already affected by Vogan's operations. The practical applications of their research began attracting attention from legitimate scientific organizations, further isolating the corporation from mainstream acceptance. Meanwhile, Lyrina's community developed innovative methods for cultivating endangered Aurelian species, proving that sustainable harvesting could provide economic benefits without compromising ecological integrity. As victories seemed within reach, unexpected challenges arose. Some members of Lyrina's community questioned their methods, fearing increased exposure would bring more threats. Others worried that even well-intentioned attention might lead to cultural appropriation. These concerns forced Thomas and Lyrina to reconsider their approach, focusing more on empowering local guardianship rather than international spectacle. They established strict protocols for sharing information, ensuring that traditional knowledge remained protected while still contributing to global understanding of environmental preservation. They developed sophisticated systems for monitoring pollen health, combining traditional wisdom with cutting-edge technology. Communities took ownership of these initiatives, ensuring that protection efforts remained rooted in local values and priorities. Thomas found himself constantly amazed by the depth of knowledge that emerged when given proper respect and resources. Ancient techniques for reading pollen patterns were enhanced by modern analytical methods, creating hybrid approaches that honored both tradition and innovation. The turning point came when major investors began withdrawing support from Vogan Corporation, citing ethical concerns and poor long-term prospects. Without its primary funding sources, the company's operations in Aurelia ground to a halt. In a final act of desperation, Vogan attempted to harvest the largest remaining Aurelian grove, only to find his equipment mysteriously malfunctioning as pollen patterns formed impenetrable barriers around the trees. Security cameras captured equipment shutting down spontaneously, with pollen forming interference patterns that short-circuited electronic systems. Public opinion had shifted decisively. Former employees spoke out about unsafe practices and falsified research. Environmental organizations presented damning evidence of ecological damage. Even politicians, initially swayed by promises of economic development, began advocating for strict protection measures. The corporation's empire crumbled almost overnight, its assets seized to fund restoration efforts. International courts ruled in favor of indigenous rights, establishing legal precedents that would protect similar ecosystems worldwide. Vogan himself disappeared from public view, his reputation irreparably damaged by the revelations of his unethical practices. Years later, Thomas and Lyrina stood together beneath a restored Aurelian canopy, watching as new generations learned to read the living stories written in light. Their partnership had blossomed into something neither had anticipated, a fusion of artistic vision and cultural wisdom that redefined what it meant to preserve heritage. The glow that had begun in Thomas's skin now marked him as fully integrated into this world he had fought to protect, his presence triggering responses in the pollen that signaled acceptance and belonging. Around them, communities thrived, finding innovative ways to share their traditions without compromising their integrity. Artists from across the galaxy came to study and collaborate, but always under terms set by those who had safeguarded these mysteries through centuries of change. Strict regulations governed access to sensitive areas, while educational programs ensured that visitors understood and respected local customs. The pollen continued its eternal dance, weaving new stories into the ancient tapestry while maintaining the integrity of its core narratives. Their work had inspired similar movements worldwide, with other communities standing up to protect their own unique ecosystems from corporate exploitation. The lessons learned in Aurelia became case studies in sustainable development, demonstrating that progress didn't have to come at the expense of cultural heritage or environmental health. Scientific research continued to uncover new aspects of the pollen's properties, but always with the consent and guidance of local guardians who maintained ultimate control over how their resources were used and studied. As they walked through the glowing forest, hand in hand, neither could have predicted the journey that had brought them here. What had started as a quest for beauty had become a testament to the power of understanding, respect, and collaboration. The living light of Aurelia pulsed around them, promising that some mysteries are best left to grow naturally, tended by those who truly understand their value. New species of Aurelian plants had emerged, their pollen patterns telling stories of resilience and renewal that enriched the existing narrative tapestry. The forest itself seemed to breathe differently now, its rhythms more complex and vibrant than before the crisis. Scientists documented unprecedented levels of biodiversity, attributing the resurgence to the community-driven conservation methods that had been implemented. Traditional practices, once in danger of being lost, now flourished alongside modern innovations, creating a hybrid approach to environmental stewardship that other regions began adopting. Educational exchanges brought researchers and students from across the world, all eager to learn from the success story that had emerged from conflict. At the heart of it all stood Thomas and Lyrina, their bond strengthened by shared purpose and mutual growth. They had established an institute dedicated to studying and preserving bioluminescent phenomena, but more importantly, they had helped create a model for how scientific advancement and cultural preservation could coexist harmoniously. Their story served as inspiration for countless others facing similar threats, proof that even against seemingly insurmountable odds, determined individuals working together could protect what mattered most. Want to discover more amazing stories from across the universe? Subscribe to our channel for weekly journeys into wonder and imagination.